Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a radio show. We are calling this radio show Unlike Other Nations because we want everyone to believe that we live in a country, indeed, that is unlike other nations. There's a special role to play in the history of the world today. I'm Father Tom Koys, Catholic priest here in Chicago. Thank you for listening.
And I'm John Koys, Father Tom's older brother.
Very good. And I know a lot of our listeners, John, are not in our Catholic denomination, or many of our brothers and sisters in different evangelical congregations. We welcome them with open arms. Truly believe this is a time of a special, a calling for us to be united, a time for us to work on understanding each other in even better ways, and actually working together to, shall I say, fix a broken world. The world's broken in a lot of ways, John.
Yes, it is. We should be striving at that Christian unity every day. And
we will fix it faster and better if we are really united in the Spirit of Jesus Christ. John, this program is being aired in November 14th. However, we're recording on November 2nd.
Election Day.
Happens to be a Tuesday, first Tuesday in November, which means I hope everyone got out and voted today. Although you're listening to this and you and I will know the results at this point in time. We don't know those results yet. Praying for a good change, an important referendum on the direction of our country. I'd like to take this opportunity, John, to reflect, since we don't know the outcomes of the elections. We can't talk about them. But I would like to take this opportunity to reflect on the concept of patriotism, the concept of being patriotic, and how we should best be that. Voting always makes me feel good, even though I don't hardly ever see the winners. The people that my candidates hardly ever win.
Gotta keep trying.
Because I live in Chicago, and I usually don't vote the regular Chicago way. But be that as it may, I still feel good doing it. There's a little sense of hope. There's a spark of optimism.
Absolutely.
That is born each time you go in to vote. I'd like to call our listeners' attention to a very famous writer from England. He died in, I believe it was 1936. A guy by the name of G.K. Chesterton. And as I think of the theme of patriotism, I automatically thought of one chapter in one of my favorite books of his. He wrote a book called Orthodoxy. It's kind of an explanation of why he is a Christian, why he embraces Christianity. He played a lot with liberalism and atheism and agnosticism and communism and all sorts of isms. But he settled on Christianity as his foundational rock to stand on. Read if you can get that book. It's well worth a read. One of the chapters is called "The Flag of the World," and I'd like to use some of his ideas to help us understand a little bit better. Let's probe this idea of patriotism. This idea of being someone who is committed to this country, loves this country, and committed to making it better. In an interesting way, he starts this chapter on the flag of the world in an interesting way by talking about a problem, a dilemma he had as a young person, because he knew a lot of people considered their philosophy of life either one or the other. Many people's philosophy of life is the optimist. The other philosophy of life is the pessimist.
We've all known optimists and pessimists. I think people can relate to that.
Exactly. But he thinks to himself, what does it mean to be an optimist? And he says, if that means, let me quickly quote one thing here. He says, the only thing which might be considered evident was that they could not mean what they said. For the ordinary verbal explanation was that the optimist thought this world as good as it could be, while the pessimist thought it as bad as it could be. Both these statements being obviously raving nonsense, one had to cast about for other explanations. So that's what he does. He tries to understand the sense of optimism, pessimism, as it relates to patriotism, as it relates to our attitude toward the world, and even broader, to the universe. Mm-hmm. You could say you could be optimistic about where you live. Now, of course, where you live could mean your town.
Your city, your country.
Could be your country, could be this universe. This is where we live.
No other options there.
There's no other options, but it's a good thing to think about. We should we not have a basic loyalty to the universe is one of his points. But I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit because we need to build this up a bit. He says that there is a mature optimism and an immature optimism, a mature pessimism and an immature pessimism. And you know, John, one of my great philosophy teachers, I slept through a lot of my philosophy classes, unfortunately, but I learned a great deal also. And one of the things I remember, one of my favorite philosophy teachers, a priest by the name of Father Sokolowski, embedded in our minds the idea that a good thinker is one who makes good distinctions. It is all about making good distinctions.
Okay, define that. What do you...
Well, in our case right now, as we think about the optimist and the pessimist, we need to distinguish between a mature optimist and an immature optimist, a mature pessimist and an immature pessimist. And unfortunately, Chesterton is warning us, be aware, all of you out there in Radio Land 2 listening, there are many more immature pessimists and immature optimists.
Define what those are for people. Don't think they...
Excellent. The immature optimist is someone who says, everything is fine. Don't talk to me of any wrong. Whistle, be happy. And in a certain sense, ignore.
Bury your head in the sand.
Bury your head in the sand, no matter
what.
The
negative things in the world.
Yes. That would be the immature optimist. Okay. Because even a good optimist knows there's a lot of problems. I'd like to say that the bad optimist is best seen today in what I like to call is the liberal, progressive political thinkers of today, the ones you listen to on CNN most of the time or other liberal media outlets. These they like to consider themselves optimists, but in fact, I believe they really are bad optimists. They like to criticize and ridicule. They like to fan the flames of the negative advertising. One of the things that's constant, every year at election time, if you turn into the liberal media outlets, you will always hear reports on how negative the ads are. That's the only evaluative twist that they feel comfortable.
They were overwhelming this time around. It seemed to me there were more political ads than I ever remember in the past.
Yeah.
And a great deal of them were negative.
Yeah. To me, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me so much. I remember when you walk through the halls of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, you see pictures of the Founding Fathers bashing out the Declaration of Independence. And they almost came to fisticuffs at different times. So in some sense, I expect it, and it doesn't bother me so much. I just hope they don't get too hurt. And I hope that good points are made in the process. And I'm glad I don't have to throw any punches myself in any way, shape, or form. And the bad pessimist, I see there's a good example of the bad pessimist in our world today. Those are the kind of people, when we talk about patriotism and voting and their approach to making the world a better place through the process of the political process, there's a lot of people that take the attitude of all politicians are crooks.
Right.
All politics is corrupt.
Throw the bums out. None of them are worth anything.
Exactly.
Or I won't go to vote at all because it's all corrupt.
It's all corrupt. To me, G.K. Chesterton gives us a great way to evaluate. That is a good example of bad pessimism, because there's a mature pessimism. Let me read another little quote here that gets to the essence of what he's talking about too. When he says, whatever the reason, It seemed, and still seems to me, that our attitude towards life can be better expressed in terms of a kind of military loyalty than in terms of criticism and approval, or thumbs up and thumbs down. We're always kind of thinking about thumbs up and thumbs down, who to vote for, who to not vote for. But behind that, below that, there needs to be this loyalty of a deep, deep sense. My acceptance of the universe is not just optimism. It is more like patriotism. He gives the example of a town in England called Pimlico. Now, most of our listeners, and I didn't know what Pimlico was, but it's kind of like the armpit of England.
Okay.
So just translate. For me, it makes a lot of sense if I translate the word to Detroit. Sorry to say.
And a city has a lot of problems.
Or maybe even Gary, Indiana. If you've been to Gary, it's depressing. It's frustrating. But listen to what he says. It is not enough for a man to disapprove of Detroit. In that case, he will merely cut his throat or move to Cleveland. Nor certainly is it enough for a man to approve of Detroit, for then it will remain Detroit, which will be awful. The only way out of this dilemma seems to be for someone to love Detroit, to love it with a transcendental tie, and without any earthly reason. Rome, he says, men did not love Rome because Rome was great. Rome became great because they loved her. John, I want to come back with that thought on the other side of the break. And
we can probe on this topic.
Stay tuned and put on your patriotic hats as we pray to the good Lord.